Frank Mitchell's world operated on precision. Every circuit, every connection, every voltage calculation had to be exact. There was no room for error in electrical work. At 37, he built his reputation on this attention to detail, and San Diego's most demanding clients trusted him implicitly. His small electrical repair business had grown through word of mouth alone, each satisfied customer leading to 3 more. Today, he hunched over his workbench in the workshop behind his house, carefully examining the complex circuit board under his LED work lamp. The familiar scent of solder and warm electronics filled the air as he traced a hairline crack in the copper pathway. His steady hands, weathered by 2 decades of electrical work, held the magnifying glass with practiced stability. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple in the afternoon heat, but he didn't wipe it away. Focus was everything in his line of work. "Found you," he muttered, spotting the near-invisible break in the circuit. This was where he felt most at home, in his private sanctuary, surrounded by tools and equipment that never lied, never deceived, never pretended to be something they weren't. His phone buzzed, interrupting his concentration. For a moment, hope fluttered in his chest. Maybe Taylor had finally responded to his lunch message. But no, just another client emergency. Frank checked his watch. 6:30 p.m. His wife should have been home an hour ago, but lately that meant nothing. "Mr. Mitchell," the client's voice crackled through his phone. "Our entire electrical panel is dead, and we got potential buyers coming in 2 hours. Please tell me you can help." "Give me 20 minutes," Frank replied, already packing his tools. His reputation demanded reliability, and that meant dropping everything when clients needed him. If only marriage worked on such straightforward principles. Problem, solution, satisfaction guaranteed. As he loaded his van, a well-maintained Ford Transit, with Mitchell Electrical Solutions emblazoned on the side, Frank's mind wandered to the morning's interaction with Taylor. She'd been different again. The signs were subtle but unmistakable to someone who'd spent 8 years learning her patterns. She'd worn a new dress, some designer label he didn't recognize. Her makeup had been perfect at 7 a.m., her hairstyle just so. When he'd asked about breakfast, she barely looked up from her phone. "Big clients today," she'd said, rushing out the door. "Might be late tonight. Don't wait up." The same excuse she'd been using more and more frequently. Frank navigated through evening traffic, his mind splitting between the upcoming repair job and the growing list of changes in his wife's behavior. The new clothes appearing in her closet, the expensive perfume she never wore at home, the guarded way she handled her phone, the networking events and client dinners that seemed to multiply every week. The emergency call turned out to be straightforward, a trip to GFCI that the homeowner hadn't noticed. As Frank explained the simple solution to the relieved client, he caught a glimpse of himself in a hallway mirror, graying temples, laugh lines deepening around his eyes, hands permanently marked by his trade. He looked every bit the reliable, predictable husband that Taylor had apparently grown tired of. "You're a lifesaver," the client gushed, writing out a check. "My wife would have killed me if we had to cancel another showing." Frank managed a polite smile. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Make sure to test those reset buttons monthly." The mention of a house showing triggered a flood of memories. He remembered the day he'd first met Taylor 8 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. She'd been a rookie real estate agent then, full of enthusiasm and determination. He could still picture her holding court in the backyard, wine sloshing in her plastic cup as she regaled the crowd with stories from her first year in real estate. "So this couple wants to see the master bathroom," she told the gathered guests, her laugh carrying across the yard like music. "And I'm thinking, perfect, this will seal the deal." Then we walk in, and there's a 6-foot python just chilling in the bathtub. Previous owners forgot to mention their escaped pet. I've never seen people backpedal so fast in my life. Frank, normally a wallflower at such gatherings, had found himself drawn into her orbit. While others drifted away to refill drinks or check the grill, he'd stayed, asking questions about her worst showings, her best sales, her dreams for the future. Taylor had matched his curiosity with enthusiasm, and by the end of the night, they'd exchanged numbers. Their courtship had been a study in opposites attracting. Where Frank was methodical and reserved, Taylor was spontaneous and outgoing. His idea of a perfect evening involved debugging a complex electrical system. Hers meant trying new restaurants and meeting new people. Somehow, it had worked. She brought color to his monochrome world, and he provided the stability she never had growing up. The drive home from the client's house took Frank past Taylor's real estate office, Elite Properties, housed in a sleek glass building downtown. The parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, but he spotted her red BMW in its usual space, working late again. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he drove past, resisting the urge to pull in and check on her. Through the building's glass facade, he could see lights still on in several offices, including, he noticed, the corner office belonging to Anthony Wilson. Frank had met him at the firm's Christmas party last year. Tall, polished, with the kind of confident smile that suggested he was used to getting his way. Mid-40s, recently divorced, known for closing the biggest deals in the office. And Frank remembered, with growing unease, that he was always quick to compliment Taylor's potential. At home, Frank found himself alone in their two-story colonial, the house Taylor had helped them find 3 years ago. She'd been so excited about its potential, gushing about the crown molding, the updated kitchen, the spacious master suite. Now it felt more like a stage set, with both of them playing their parts without really connecting. He moved through the quiet rooms, noting the small changes that had accumulated over the past few months. New scented candles he didn't recognize, fashion magazines she'd never shown interest in before, a yoga mat rolled up in the corner, though Taylor had always claimed to hate yoga. Each detail felt like another piece of a puzzle he didn't want to complete. In the kitchen, he opened the fridge and stared at its contents without appetite. His phone buzzed. A text from Taylor. Working late. Don't wait up. That heart emoji felt like mockery. Frank closed the fridge and headed upstairs, his footsteps echoing in the empty house. In their bedroom, he noticed more discordant details. New lingerie peeking out of a shopping bag in the corner, high-end brands Taylor had never splurged on before. The unfamiliar perfume bottle on her dresser caught his eye. Clive Christian, if he remembered the brand correctly, nearly $1,000 for a bottle of scent she never wore around him. Frank sat on the edge of their bed, running his hands over the premium Egyptian cotton sheets Taylor had insisted on buying last month. Everything in their life had been upgrading lately, everything except their relationship. A phone buzzing made him jump. Taylor's personal phone lay on her nightstand. She must have forgotten it in her rush this morning. Another unprecedented occurrence. Lately, she guarded that phone like it contained state secrets. The screen lit up with a notification. Frank stared at it, his professional ethics warring with his growing suspicion. The preview showed a text from Anthony W. Even from the lock screen, Frank could read the first line. Missing you already. Dinner was. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone. It was locked, of course, but those few words burned in his mind. His thoughts raced back to all the recent client dinners and late meetings. How many of them had really been with Anthony? Frank replaced the phone exactly as he'd found it and retreated to his workshop. The familiar smell of solder and electronics usually calmed him, but tonight it provided no comfort. He sat at his workbench, opened his laptop, and began researching surveillance options. If his suspicions were right, and 20 years of troubleshooting had taught him to trust his instincts, he needed evidence. The next few days passed in a blur of careful preparation. Frank ordered a GPS tracker and spyware package, paying extra for overnight shipping. He installed the tracker under Taylor's car while she slept, positioning it carefully near the rear axle where it wouldn't be noticed during routine maintenance. The spyware proved trickier. He needed her phone's unlock pattern. Opportunity came during breakfast 3 days later. Taylor was upstairs changing outfits for the third time that morning when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Frank, pretending to read the newspaper, watched from the corner of his eye as she unlocked it. Up, right, down, left, up. Simple, almost insultingly so. When Taylor went back upstairs to try yet another outfit, Frank moved quickly. The spyware installation took less than 2 minutes. He practiced on his own phone to make sure he could do it smoothly. By the time Taylor came back downstairs, everything was exactly as she'd left it. "How do I look?" she asked, twirling in a new dress he'd never seen before. It was red, form-fitting, definitely not typical office attire. "Beautiful," he said, because it was true. She did look beautiful, and the knowledge that it wasn't for him felt like acid in his stomach. "Big presentation today," she explained, grabbing her keys. "Might be a late one." "Seems like they're all late ones these days," Frank observed, keeping his tone neutral. Taylor paused at the door, something flickering across her face. Guilt, concern, but it passed quickly. "That's real estate for you. Don't wait up." Over the next week, Frank lived in 2 parallel realities. In one, he was the same reliable husband he'd always been, fixing electrical problems, managing his business, asking about Taylor's day. In the other, he watched his marriage disintegrate through a series of texts and location data. The messages between Taylor and Anthony were like reading a novel about strangers who happened to share his wife's name. "Anthony, left my mark on your neck. Hope hubby doesn't notice. Taylor, don't worry. Frank never looks that closely anymore. Anthony, his loss, our gain. Last night was incredible. Taylor, you're going to get me in trouble. But yes, it was amazing. Anthony, Trouble is my middle name. Unlike boring Frank. Taylor, stop. But you're right. He's so predictable. Same routine every day. Anthony, hotel tonight. 8 p.m. Wear that red dress. Taylor, can't wait. Same room. Frank read their exchanges during his lunch breaks, sitting in his van with untouched sandwiches and cold coffee. Each message was another nail in the coffin of his marriage. Anthony Wilson was exactly who Frank had pegged him for. Divorced 40-something with an Instagram full of expensive watches and coastal vacation photos. His messages alternated between describing their encounters and mocking Frank's obliviousness. The GPS tracker confirmed everything. The downtown Marriott, twice a week. Like clockwork, always for 2 to 3 hours. Always while Frank was told about client meetings, or office parties, or networking events. The precision of their scheduling would have been admirable if it wasn't so devastating. Frank started documenting everything. Dates, times, messages, locations, all carefully logged in a password-protected file on his laptop. His electrician's mindset took over, treating each piece of evidence like a component in a complex circuit. Everything had to be precise, documented, verifiable. One particularly painful evening, he tracked Taylor's car to an upscale restaurant downtown. Against his better judgment, he drove there, parking across the street. Through the restaurant's large windows, he could see them, Taylor and Anthony at a corner table, heads close together, sharing what looked like an expensive bottle of wine. She was wearing the red dress from earlier that week, the one she claimed was for a presentation. Frank watched as Anthony reached across the table, brushing his fingers against Taylor's hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned closer, laughing at something he'd said. It was the same laugh that had drawn Frank in at that barbecue 8 years ago, now tainted with betrayal. That night, Frank was in his workshop when he heard Taylor return home. Her heels clicked on the kitchen tile as she talked on her phone, her voice carrying through the window. "You're terrible." She giggled. "We can't. Not tonight. Frank's home." A pause. More laughter. "I wish I could." "No, behave. We have that showing tomorrow, remember." Frank watched through the window as his wife lied effortlessly, noting how her free hand played with her necklace, his anniversary gift from 2 years ago. When she spotted him entering through the back door, her smile vanished. "Gotta go," she said quickly into the phone. "Yes, client. I'll get those comps to you first thing tomorrow. Important call, Frank asked, his voice carefully neutral. Taylor's hand went to her necklace again, a tell he'd never noticed before. Oh, you know how it is. This couple's being really picky about their closing conditions. Sometimes you have to hold their hands through the whole process. Want dinner? I could make that pasta you like. Actually, I grabbed something at the office. Think I'll head up early. Big day tomorrow. Frank watched her climb the stairs, noting how she clutched her phone like a lifeline. Once she was gone, he returned to his workshop and pulled up the spyware dashboard on his laptop. Taylor's message to Anthony appeared almost immediately. Taylor, sorry, baby, had to cut it short. He came in. Tomorrow. Anthony, can't wait. With that black lingerie I bought you. Frank's fingers tightened on his mouse until the plastic creaked. The casual way they discussed their affair, the contempt they showed for him, the sheer audacity of their deception. It all crystallized into something cold and hard in his chest. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside Frank, a circuit completing, a connection made. He thought about all the dangerous electrical problems he'd fixed over the years, how even the most complex issues could be solved with the right approach and tools. His eyes fell on a box of personal items he'd found while doing laundry last week. Among them was a discreet personal device, another secret that now made nauseating sense. Frank picked it up, turning it over in his hands as an idea began to form. The device was high-end, rechargeable, with wireless capabilities for remote control. Perfect. He was excellent at electrical modifications. The voltage calculations would need to be precise enough to cause significant discomfort without risking permanent damage. He had all the necessary components in his workshop: miniature batteries, wireless receivers, voltage regulators, microcontrollers. The real challenge would be maintaining the device's original appearance while adding his modifications. Frank laid out his tools with methodical care, the same way he approached any complex electrical job. His multimeter, soldering iron, wire strippers, and a selection of precision screwdrivers formed a neat row on his workbench. If Taylor and Anthony wanted to play their games, he'd make sure the final round would be one they'd never forget. Hours passed as he worked. Frank lost himself in the technical details, the familiar comfort of electrical engineering pushing aside the emotional storm. He carefully disassembled the device, mapping its circuitry. The original motor and battery configuration would stay in place. His additions would be parallel to the existing system, triggered by a separate wireless signal. Amateur design, he muttered, examining the original circuit board. No overcurrent protection, minimal safety features. He could do better, much better. Frank tested different voltage configurations, carefully calibrating the shock intensity. Too little would defeat the purpose. Too much could cause real harm. He wasn't looking to injure, just to teach a lesson they'd remember. Each component was chosen for maximum effect with minimum risk. A custom microcontroller to regulate the voltage, a discrete antenna for reliable signal reception, and a specially modified battery pack that could deliver the exact amperage he needed. The work required absolute precision. Frank soldered hair-thin wires, modified circuit paths, and added his own safety features. By midnight, he had the basic modifications complete. By 2 a.m., he'd written and uploaded the control software to the microcontroller. By 3 a.m., he was testing the finished product. The modified device looked identical to the original but contained a carefully concealed surprise that he could trigger remotely through his phone. He'd even maintained the original functions. It would work exactly as intended until he activated his additions. From the outside, no one would suspect anything was different. Frank created a simple control app on his phone, disguising it as a utility program. One tap would activate the device's special features. He could adjust the intensity, duration, and pattern of the shocks. Everything was calibrated to cause maximum discomfort while staying within safe limits. He was angry, not murderous. When he finally went up to bed, Taylor was already asleep. She'd left her phone on the nightstand again. Sloppy, overconfident. Their messages were still there. Anthony, can't stop thinking about you. Tomorrow's too far away. Taylor, patience. Good things come to those who wait. Anthony, I'm not good at waiting, and neither are you. Taylor, true, but Frank's clueless as always. We have all the time in the world. Frank lay in the darkness, listening to his wife's steady breathing, and mentally reviewed his plans for the next day. He would wait until she left for work, then plant the modified device in her purse, replacing the original she kept there for her hotel meetings with Anthony. The familiar rhythm of problem-solving calmed his nerves. In electrical work, every problem had a solution. Every circuit could be fixed, modified, or improved. This was no different, just another job requiring the right tools and careful execution. For the first time in weeks, Frank felt truly calm. There was comfort in having a plan, in knowing exactly how things would play out. He closed his eyes and began running through the final calculations in his head, double-checking every detail. When it came to electrical work, precision was everything. One mistake could ruin the entire project. Tomorrow would begin like any other day. Taylor would leave for work, thinking she had everyone fooled. She would meet Anthony, thinking she was in control. But by the time the day ended, they would both learn a shocking lesson about the consequences of underestimating a man they dismissed as boring and clueless. Frank smiled in the darkness. Sometimes the most devastating current was the one you never saw coming. Frank sat in his truck outside the Marriott, watching the hotel's entrance through tinted windows. The modified device was in place. He'd switched it with the original in Taylor's purse that morning while she was in the shower. His phone displayed the GPS tracker's map, showing Taylor's car already parked in the hotel garage. "Working late again," he muttered, checking the message she'd sent him an hour ago. His phone buzzed with intercepted messages between Taylor and Anthony. Taylor, just parked. Room 1542. Anthony, already here, beautiful. Brought champagne. Taylor, fancy. Give me 5 minutes to freshen up. Frank's jaw tightened as he watched Taylor enter the hotel, wearing the red dress from earlier. She moved with confident steps, like someone who'd made this walk many times before. The doorman greeted her with familiar recognition, another detail that made Frank's blood boil. His phone chimed again. Anthony, this time, hurry up. Getting impatient. Patience is a virtue, Frank whispered, opening his control app. Something you're about to learn the hard way. He waited 15 minutes, giving them time to get comfortable, to feel safe in their little bubble of deception. The spyware showed more messages. Taylor, ready for some fun? Anthony, always, brought something special. Taylor, you know it, your favorite toy. Frank watched their messages stop abruptly. He counted to 60, imagining the scene. Then, with surgical precision, he pressed the button. The effect was instantaneous. Through the spyware, Frank's phone captured the chaos in real time. Anthony, what the heck? Taylor, oh gosh, make it stop. Anthony, turn it off. Turn it off. Frank adjusted the intensity, his fingers moving across the app's controls with the same precision he used for delicate electrical work. A series of loud thumps came through the hotel walls, probably Anthony falling off the bed. Goodness gracious, Anthony's voice carried through the walls. What on earth is that thing? I don't know. Taylor's panic was evident. It's never done this before. Frank increased the voltage slightly, just enough to make his point. More screams erupted from the room. He could hear furniture being knocked over, the sound of bodies stumbling around in panic. Get it out, Anthony was shouting. For heaven's sake, Taylor, I'm trying. A sharp knock interrupted their chaos. Hotel security. Is everything all right in there? Frank smiled. Right on schedule. The hotel staff would have heard the commotion by now. He kept the device active but reduced the intensity enough to maintain the panic without risking injury. Everything's fine, Taylor called out, her voice strained. Just a Just a minute. Ma'am, we've had several complaints about screaming. We need to check on your safety. Anthony's voice was higher than usual. Tell them to go away. Sir, if you don't open the door, we'll be forced to call the police. Frank listened to them scrambling around, probably trying to get dressed. The device continued its work, making their efforts considerably more difficult. Another frantic message from Taylor. What do we do? Anthony, get rid of that thing. Taylor, I can't make it stop. More pounding on the door. Security. Last warning before we call the police. Frank decided it was time for his entrance. He timed everything perfectly. The hotel staff's response time. The police protocol. The building's security procedures. He stepped out of his truck and walked calmly toward the hotel entrance, his phone still controlling the device. The lobby was elegant, all marble and chrome. Frank approached the front desk, maintaining his professional demeanor. Good evening, he said to the receptionist. I believe there's a disturbance in room 1542. That's my wife up there. The receptionist's eyes widened. Sir, security is handling the situation. I know exactly what's happening, Frank said, showing her his phone with the control app visible. You might want to call the police. Things are about to get interesting. Frank rode the elevator to the 15th floor, accompanied by 2 security guards, their radios crackling with updates. The commotion from 1542 was audible as soon as the elevator doors opened. It's this way, one guard said unnecessarily. Frank could have found it blindfolded, just following the sound of chaos. Outside the room, a small crowd had gathered. Other security personnel, a manager in a crisp suit, and several curious guests peeking from their doorways. The pounding on the door continued. Police are on their way, the manager informed Frank. Sir, you said this involves your wife. Yes, Frank replied calmly, holding up his phone. And I can explain exactly what's happening in there. Another scream from inside, followed by a crash. Anthony's voice. Just throw it out the window. Taylor. We can't. It'll hurt someone. Frank kept the device active, but reduced the intensity enough to drag things out. Open this door immediately. The manager called out. Police are entering the building. Inside, they heard frantic movement. 1 minute. Taylor's voice was desperate. Please, just one. To heck with this, a burly security guard muttered. He stepped forward with a master key card. Stand back, everyone. The door swung open to reveal a scene of absolute chaos. The luxury suite looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes were scattered everywhere, champagne soaked into the carpet from a broken bottle, and a lamp lay shattered near the window. Anthony Wilson, wearing only his dress pants, was hopping around like a man on hot coals. Taylor, wrapped hastily in a bedsheet, was trying to contain the still active device with a pillow. Neither of them noticed the door opening at first. Having technical difficulties, Frank's voice cut through their panic like a knife. The look on their faces was worth every second of planning. Taylor went pale, the sheet slipping from her grasp. Anthony froze mid-hop, his expression shifting from pain to fear as he recognized Frank. Whoa, what? Taylor's voice was barely a whisper. How? Frank held up his phone, showing them the control app. Interesting thing about electrical devices, he said conversationally. They're fairly easy to modify if you know what you're doing. You. Anthony found his voice, though it was an octave higher than usual. You did this. Frank adjusted the settings again, making Anthony yelp and jump. Surprise. The security team and manager stood in the doorway, trying to make sense of the scene. 2 police officers arrived, pushing through the crowd. What's going on here? One officer demanded. Officer, Frank said calmly, I'd be happy to explain. You see, I'm an electrician by trade. When I discovered my wife was having an affair with her coworker here, I decided to upgrade one of their favorite toys. Would you like a demonstration? He moved his finger on the phone screen. Anthony screamed and fell onto the bed. Frank, please, Taylor begged. Turn it off. Why? Frank's voice was ice. Isn't this exciting enough for you? I thought you were tired of safe and predictable. The officers exchanged glances. Sir, one said to Frank, I need you to deactivate whatever device you're controlling. Of course, officer, Frank said, lowering the intensity but not fully deactivating it. But first, I think Mr. Wilson here owes everyone an explanation. Anthony was hunched over, sweat dripping from his face. You're insane. Another jolt made him jump. Wrong answer, Frank said. Want to try again? Fine, Anthony gasped. We've been having an affair. Is that what you want to hear? Just turn this thing off. The female officer stepped forward. Sir, last warning. Deactivate the device. Frank complied, watching with satisfaction as both Taylor and Anthony sagged with relief. The manager was trying to usher curious onlookers away from the door, but the damage was done. Several people had their phones out, recording everything. Now, the male officer said, pulling out his notebook, let's get everyone's statement, starting with you, Mr. Mitchell. Frank Mitchell. He handed over his driver's license. I'd be happy to explain everything, including how my wife and her lover have been meeting here twice a week for the past 3 months. Taylor clutched the sheet tighter. Frank, please don't. Don't what, Taylor? Tell the truth. He turned to the officers. I have all their messages, hotel receipts, GPS records. Everything's documented. Anthony tried to stand straighter, attempting to regain some dignity despite being half naked. This is abuse. I want him arrested. Frank laughed coldly. For what? You voluntarily used a personal device that happened to malfunction. I'm just an electrician who noticed a dangerous product defect. Isn't that right, officers? The female officer looked suspiciously like she was suppressing a smile. Sir, did you physically assault anyone? No, ma'am. I never touched them. Did you force them to use any devices against their will? Not at all. They made that choice themselves. Anthony's face reddened. This is ridiculous. He deliberately what? Frank interrupted. Protected my interests. Gathered evidence of adultery. Created an innovative product demonstration. Please, enlighten everyone. The officers exchanged looks again. The female officer turned to Taylor. Ma'am, do you want to press charges against your husband? Taylor, still pale, shook her head. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Mr. Wilson, the male officer asked, would you like to file a complaint? Anthony opened his mouth, then closed it. The humiliation of explaining exactly what happened in a police report seemed to dawn on him. That's what I thought, Frank said. He turned to the hotel manager. I apologize for the disturbance. I'll cover any damages to the room. Of course, the manager nodded stiffly. That would be appreciated, Mr. Mitchell. I suggest everyone get dressed, the female officer said, eyeing the growing crowd in the hallway. We'll need official statements. Anthony fumbled for his shirt, wincing with every movement. This isn't over, Mitchell. Oh, I think it is. Frank held up his phone. Unless you'd like another demonstration. I have several voltage settings we haven't tried yet. The male officer stepped between them. That won't be necessary, Mr. Mitchell. Taylor emerged from the bathroom, now wearing her red dress, mascara streaked down her face. Frank, can we please talk about this privately? Like you talked privately about me with Anthony. Frank's voice was eerily calm. Let's see. What was it you called me? Boring, clueless, predictable Frank, who never notices anything. I think I've proven that assessment wrong, wouldn't you say? I didn't mean. Taylor started. Don't. Frank cut her off. Don't insult both of us by lying more. He turned to the officers. I have video evidence of their affair, including today's events. Would you like to see? Anthony straightened his tie with trembling hands. You recorded us? That's illegal. Actually, Frank smiled coldly. Recording devices in your own personal property is perfectly legal. And since the device in question belonged to my wife, purchased with our joint account. The female officer cleared her throat. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need your information for the report. She glanced at Taylor and Anthony. I suspect no one wants this incident in an official report. You can't just walk away from this. Anthony snarled, his bravado returning now that the device was deactivated. I'll sue you for everything you've got. Frank turned slowly, his eyes cold. Will you? Let's think about that. You want to explain to a judge how you were injured while using a personal device during an affair with a married woman. Want to tell exactly what you were doing when it malfunctioned. I'm sure the local news would love to cover that trial. Anthony's face cycled through several shades of red. You are? What? Caught you. Embarrassed you. Made you face consequences. Frank's voice remained steady. Go ahead. Sue me. I'll countersue for alienation of affection. I'm sure your other clients would love to know how you conduct business with married women. Frank. Taylor's voice cracked. You're better than this. No, Frank replied. I'm exactly who I've always been. Methodical, thorough, detail-oriented. He smiled without warmth. You just never appreciated those qualities. Too boring for you, remember? The hotel manager cleared his throat. If there are no charges being filed, I need this room cleared. We have other guests to consider. Of course. Frank nodded. I'll stop by the front desk to pay for the damages. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Taylor, don't bother coming home tonight. I've already changed the locks. You can't do that. Taylor protested. It's my house too. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. I bought it before we married. Frank's smile was razor sharp. Another boring detail you never paid attention to. The officers began ushering everyone out. The crowd in the hallway finally dispersed, though not before capturing final photos of Anthony and Taylor's walk of shame. In the elevator, Frank stood calmly while Taylor sobbed quietly in the corner, and Anthony stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. You know what the funny thing is? Frank said as they reached the lobby. I actually have to thank you both. You showed me exactly who you are. No more pretending. No more lies. The elevator doors opened to reveal several hotel staff, trying to look busy while obviously watching the drama unfold. Frank, wait. Taylor called as he headed for the front desk. What about our 8 years together? Don't they mean anything? Frank turned one last time. They meant everything to me. That's why you'll never see me again. Goodbye, Taylor. He paid for the damages at the front desk, ignoring Taylor's continued pleas and Anthony's dark glares. As he walked to his truck, his phone buzzed with messages from Taylor. Please don't do this. We can fix this. I'm sorry. Frank, please respond. He deleted them all without responding. The night air felt clean, fresh. For the first time in months, he could breathe freely. No more suspicion, no more doubt, no more lies. As he drove home, Frank reflected on the evening's events. He'd planned for every contingency, calculated every risk, and executed everything perfectly, just like any other electrical job. The fact that it had blown up their comfortable lives was simply a bonus. Tomorrow, he'd start planning his next move. But tonight, he'd enjoy the satisfaction of a job well done. 2 weeks after the hotel incident, Frank sat in the upscale offices of Chun and Associates, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of downtown San Diego. The viral videos played on a laptop between him and his lawyer, differing angles of the hotel confrontation. Some clear, some shaky, all damaging. 3 million views on TikTok, Patricia Chun said, closing the laptop. Another 2 million on YouTube. Someone even made a remix. Frank watched his lawyer organize the evidence spread across her mahogany desk. GPS records, text messages, hotel receipts, all meticulously documented in his precise electrician style. They don't have a leg to stand on, Patricia said with satisfaction. Your documentation is impeccable. Most clients bring me stories. You brought me a case file worthy of the FBI. A notification lit up Frank's phone. Another message from Taylor. Please talk to me. I'm losing everything. He deleted it without reading further. His phone showed 12 missed calls from her since morning. Taylor's lawyer made another attempt at negotiation, Patricia said, holding up a fresh document. They're still pushing for half of everything. Frank's laugh was cold. After what's in those videos, they're delusional. They're desperate. Patricia pulled up local news coverage on her tablet. Elite Properties put both Taylor and Anthony on indefinite leave yesterday. Their clients are jumping ship faster than rats on the Titanic. 3 of Anthony's biggest listings pulled out this morning. Good. The managing partner at Elite called me personally. Patricia continued. They're worried about guilt by association. Apparently, showing properties is difficult when potential clients keep asking about that personal device video. Frank's phone buzzed again. Taylor's 4th attempt today. Patricia eyed him. You might want to consider a restraining order. Her attempts to contact you are becoming excessive. Not yet. Let her dig herself deeper. Patricia studied him over her glasses. You sure you want to play hardball? Sometimes, a clean break. There's nothing clean about betrayal. Frank cut her off. Let them burn. Speaking of burning, Patricia pulled up an email. Anthony's lawyer is threatening a lawsuit. Claims you caused him severe emotional and physical distress. Frank returned home that evening to find Taylor waiting in his kitchen. She sat at the counter, shoulders hunched, looking smaller without her usual designer clothes and perfect makeup. She'd used her old key, the one he hadn't gotten around to changing yet. Breaking and entering now. His voice made her jump. Adding to your list of accomplishments. I used my key, Taylor said, standing quickly. Please, just hear me out. 5 minutes. Frank took in the changes 2 weeks had wrought. Dark circles under her eyes, unwashed hair, designer clothes replaced by wrinkled jeans and a faded blouse. Her polished real estate agent persona had crumbled. 2 options, Frank said, pulling out his phone. You leave now, or I call the police. They're destroying us online. Taylor's voice cracked. Every comment, every share. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. My sister showed me a TikTok someone made. They set the hotel video to another one bites the dust. Finally gone viral, just like you always wanted. This isn't funny, Frank. I can't even buy groceries without people whispering. The checkout girl at Whole Foods asked if I was that realtor from the personal device video. Tears welled in her eyes. Anthony's biggest clients, the Hendersons, you remember them, pulled their $4.2 million listing yesterday. Sounds like a you problem. Frank started dialing. Stop. Taylor reached for his phone. 8 years, Frank. 8 years of marriage. Does that mean nothing to you? Frank jerked away from her touch. Funny how you remember those 8 years now. Did they mean anything when you were laughing about me with Anthony? When you called me boring and clueless? I was stupid, selfish. The affair, it wasn't about you. Anthony made me feel excited. Alive. Special. Frank's voice dripped sarcasm. I read everything, Taylor. Every message. Every lie. She paled. Everything. Frank's so predictable, he quoted. He never notices anything. He's too wrapped up in his circuits. Want me to continue? I have them all saved. Those messages were, I didn't mean. My personal favorite was you agreeing when Anthony called me a boring man. Really showed your true feelings. Tears streaked down Taylor's face, ruining what was left of her mascara. I didn't mean those things. I got caught up in the excitement, the danger. Well, you got your danger. How exciting was that hotel room? You humiliated us. No, you humiliated yourselves. I just provided the spotlight. He paused. Speaking of spotlights, how's that new Clive Christian perfume working out? The $1,000 bottle you bought for Anthony. Taylor's hand went to her throat. How did you? I know everything. The lingerie you bought for him, The hotel room preferences, his favorite positions, the jokes about my long work hours. Tell me, was it worth it? Trading 8 years for a few months of cheap thrills. Taylor stepped closer, desperation in her eyes. We can fix this. Go to counseling. Start over. Start over. Frank laughed. Let me show you something. He pulled out his phone, opened a video, and turned it toward her. The footage showed her and Anthony in the hotel lobby from 2 months ago, his hand on her lower back as they checked in. How many videos do you have? Taylor whispered. Enough. Want to see the one from La Costa Resort, or the business lunch at Costa? Anthony seemed very hands-on with his business partner. Stop it. Why? You didn't stop. Week after week, lying to my face, coming home with his marks on your skin, spending our money on your little adventures. I'll do anything, Taylor pleaded. Whatever you want. Just help me salvage what's left of my career. Frank's expression hardened. Get out. Now. Before I add trespassing charges to your highlight reel. Frank. Get out. His shout echoed through the kitchen. The next time you enter my house uninvited, you'll leave in handcuffs. Taylor grabbed her purse with shaking hands. At the door, she turned. You've changed. You're not the man I married. No. I just stopped pretending to be what you wanted. Now I'm exactly who I am. The man you thought was too boring to love. After she left, Frank called his locksmith. Within an hour, new locks were being installed while he reviewed emails from Patricia. Anthony's lawsuit had arrived. The next morning, Frank sat in Patricia's office again, reading the lawsuit documents with growing amusement. Emotional and physical abuse, he read aloud. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Defamation of character. He looked at Patricia. $5 million in damages. He's really reaching. It gets better, Patricia said, flipping pages. He claims your malicious actions have destroyed his real estate career. Apparently, losing the Hendersons' listing was the final straw. Malicious actions. Frank raised an eyebrow. You mean when he voluntarily used a malfunctioning device during an affair with my wife? Exactly. He's going to have a hard time proving damages without admitting to adultery with a married woman. Patricia grinned. Plus, I got something that'll shut this down fast. She opened her laptop, showing Frank a series of emails. Anthony's been busy. 3 weeks before the hotel incident, he started moving clients to a competing agency, was planning to jump ship and take Taylor with him. Really? Frank leaned forward. Oh yes. Elite Properties' IT department was very helpful once I mentioned possible corporate espionage. Turns out our friend Anthony was planning to steal clients and agents. The managing partner is livid. A week later, Frank sat in a conference room facing Anthony and his lawyer. Taylor sat in the corner, called as a witness. The contrast was striking. Anthony's expensive suit couldn't hide the dark circles under his eyes and nervous twitches. His usual arrogant smirk had vanished. This is a waste of time, Anthony's lawyer started. My client has suffered serious. Let me stop you right there, Patricia interrupted, sliding photos across the table. These were taken at the Marriott. Timestamps match hotel records showing your client checked in under his business account. Is this how Elite Properties' expense accounts should be used? Anthony shifted uncomfortably. That's not. And these, Patricia continued, producing a stack of papers, are your client's emails to competing agencies, discussing plans to steal Elite's clients. Fascinating reading. The color drained from Anthony's face. We haven't even gotten to the text messages yet. Patricia smiled. Would you like me to read them aloud? The ones where you mock Mr. Mitchell while planning rendezvous with his wife, or perhaps the ones discussing your plan to poach agents from Elite. Those messages were obtained illegally, Anthony's lawyer protested. Actually, Frank spoke up, they were recovered from devices purchased with my joint account, registered under my name. Perfectly legal. Now, Patricia leaned forward. Let's discuss reality. You want to pursue this lawsuit? Fine. But everything becomes public record. Every text, every hotel receipt, every video, including the ones your client doesn't know about yet. What other videos? Anthony's voice cracked. The La Costa Resort was lovely this time of year, Frank said casually, though you might want to be more discreet on hotel balconies in the future. You're bluffing, Anthony said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. Frank nodded to Patricia, who pulled out a USB drive. Shall we play a few highlights? I particularly enjoy the part where you discuss stealing the Hendersons' listing. Wait. Anthony grabbed his lawyer's arm. We need to discuss this privately. Of course, Patricia said. Take all the time you need. Though I should mention Elite's managing partner is very interested in these videos, especially the parts about client poaching. In the hallway, Taylor cornered Frank. Stop this. Haven't we all suffered enough? Suffered? Frank's voice was ice. Like I suffered watching my wife sneak around for months. Like I suffered reading your messages about how boring and pathetic I was. I'm sleeping on my sister's couch, Taylor's voice rose. My reputation is ruined. I might lose my license. Actions meet consequences. Frank checked his watch. I give them 10 minutes before they withdraw the lawsuit. Is this what you want? Taylor demanded. To destroy everything. You destroyed everything the moment you decided I wasn't exciting enough for you. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. Anthony's lawyer emerged from the conference room in 7 minutes, not 10. His face was ashen. We're withdrawing all claims, he said stiffly. In exchange, we want all copies of everything. Frank smiled. No deal. I keep everything. Insurance against future stupidity. You can't. I can. And I will. Your client tries anything. Anything at all. And everything goes public. Every detail. Frank stood. And tell Anthony the managing partner at Elite would love to discuss his client poaching over coffee. Anthony stormed out, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. The confident real estate star had been reduced to a shadow of himself. Back in Patricia's office, she reviewed their victory. Elite's filing suit against him for breach of contract, she said. The Hendersons are furious about being played. And 3 other agencies have blacklisted him. She looked up at Frank. You don't do anything halfway, do you? In electrical work, halfway gets people hurt. Speaking of work, Patricia slid over some papers. The offer on your business came through. Sure you want to sell? Frank nodded. Time for a fresh start. That evening, Frank walked through his empty house. The divorce was final. Taylor got nothing except her personal belongings and the scorn of San Diego's real estate community. His phone showed a news alert. Anthony had accepted a position with a small agency in Phoenix, his reputation in California unsalvageable. Taylor was working as a waitress, her license suspended pending investigation. His phone buzzed with yet another message from Taylor. I miss you. Miss us. Please. Frank deleted it without reading further. He'd already packed most of the house, the rooms echoing with emptiness. But it wasn't a sad emptiness. It felt clean, purged, like the air after a thunderstorm. In his workshop, Frank ran his hands over his tools one last time. Each one had played a part in his revenge, helped him rewire not just circuits but his entire life. The workbench where he'd modified the device that exposed their affair. The computer where he'd monitored their betrayal. The tools that had helped him regain control. His phone chimed. Confirmation that the sale of his business had closed. The numbers in his account would let him start fresh anywhere he wanted. He'd already found a promising location in Seattle, far from the whispers and viral videos of San Diego. As Frank loaded the last box into his truck, he took a final look at the house. 8 years of memories, good and bad, all ending with a whimper rather than a bang, though he supposed there had been enough bangs in that hotel room. The GPS was already programmed with his route north. Seattle didn't know him as the boring husband or the man from the viral video. They wouldn't see him coming. Frank smiled as he pulled away from the curb. Sometimes the most devastating current was the one you never saw coming. And sometimes the most shocking revelation wasn't the betrayal. It was discovering exactly what you were capable of when pushed too far. In his rearview mirror, he saw Taylor's car turning onto his street, probably for one last attempt at reconciliation. But he was already gone, leaving behind the ashes of his old life and the wreckage of those who had underestimated him. Let them remember him as the boring electrician who had turned their comfortable lies into a cautionary tale. Let them wonder what other surprises he might have kept hidden away. After all, the best revenge wasn't just about the shock. It was about the aftermath, when the power finally went out, leaving them alone in the dark. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.